The next morning, when Billie Holiday woke up, she knew her life would never be the same. Letters slipped under her door, silent phone calls, mysterious figures following her on the street. It all started after that night. She sang Strange Fruit. Until then, Lady Day had just been focused on music, barely interested in politics, a young artist going about her business. But overnight, she had become one of America's most controversial figures. Record company executives were calling her, begging her not to sing the song again. Club owners were anxiously asking about the situation. But the most terrifying were the threats from unidentified people. Letters that started with "Black Girl, Know Your Place" and continued with "If you sing that song again." Billie Holiday understood that morning that she was no longer just a singer. Whether she wanted it or not, she was in the middle of a war. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel as we share these shocking stories with you. We'll continue uncovering the darkest secrets of music history together. That night at Café Society was supposed to be just another jazz performance. This small club in Greenwich Village was one of New York's rare venues that didn't practice racial segregation. Black and white customers sat at the same tables, listening to the same artists. Billie Holiday had sung her usual repertoire that evening, mesmerizing the audience. But at the end of the night, she decided to do something different. When she took the stage one last time, she had a piece of paper in her hand. It contained the lyrics to a song written by Abel Meeropol, a Jewish teacher. This song, titled Strange Fruit, exposed America's darkest truth: the lynchings happening in the South, the black bodies hanging from trees, the normalization of savagery. Lady Day approached the microphone and began singing those deadly words. When the song ended, the club fell into deep silence. Nobody applauded, nobody spoke, because everyone was in shock. Billie Holiday hadn't just sung a song that night. She had touched America's conscience, but this touch would put her in the crosshairs. Among the audience were people who believed this song should never be sung again. Some of them even made phone calls that very night to report the situation. Because in 1930s America, some truths were forbidden to speak. On the morning of April 5th, when Billie Holiday woke up, she found 3 letters under her door. The first looked like a fan letter, but its content was bone-chilling. Written by hand, it read, "We heard you sing that song last night. You just sing songs, you don't do politics. If you sing that song again, your body will swing from southern trees too." The second letter was more direct. "Black girl, know your place. In America, everyone knows their place. Your place is singing on stage, not talking back to us. You've been warned." The third letter was the most terrifying. Inside was a photograph of a lynched black man with these words written on the back: "You could be next." Lady Day's hands were shaking as she read these letters. She was only 24 years old and had never faced such threats. But this was just the beginning. That afternoon, the phone started ringing. The calls were silent, no one spoke, just heavy breathing, then hanging up. Toward evening, the apartment doorman warned her, "Miss Holiday, there are men asking about you. They don't look friendly." When Lady Day looked out the window, she saw 2 figures waiting on the street. Men in fedora hats and long coats, their faces invisible. The next day, Columbia Records called. John Hammond, the record company executive in Billie Holiday's contract, spoke with a tense voice. "Billie, we heard what you did last night. This song is too controversial. As a company, we can't support such content." Hammond was actually a civil rights supporter as a producer, but this time he was speaking differently. Because he had been pressured by the company's upper management, Columbia Records bosses had given strict orders not to record Strange Fruit. Some Southern executives at the company were even threatening to terminate Billie Holiday's contract. Lady Day was told to forget this song, continue with your normal songs. But for Billie Holiday, this was impossible now, because Strange Fruit felt like more than just a song to her. It felt like a mission. That same day, phone calls started coming from other New York clubs. The Cotton Club's manager politely but firmly said, "We're canceling your program this week." A similar decision came from the Savoy Ballroom. Lady Day's concert schedule was melting away. The music industry had quietly but effectively begun a boycott, because Strange Fruit could make not just Billie Holiday, but everyone who employed her, a target. Barney Josephson, the owner of Café Society, found himself in a difficult position. The phone calls to his club never stopped. Callers were making threats without identifying themselves. If you put that black girl on stage again, we'll burn down your club. Some callers openly said they were Ku Klux Klan members, stating they would apply Southern justice. Josephson had to take these threats seriously because the KKK was active not just in the South, but in New York too. Even more frightening was the friendly visit from local police. The deputy commissioner had visited Josephson at his office, giving advice about not having content that would disturb public peace, sung at the club. This advice seemed polite, but was actually a threat. Even regular customers were worried. Some were saying, "Barney, this isn't good, they'll burn us down too," and starting to stay away from the club. Café Society's revenue was beginning to drop, but Josephson was a brave man. He continued to support Billie Holiday and allowed her to sing Strange Fruit at his club. This decision would cost him dearly. Normally, New York's music press closely followed every move of Billie Holiday. Magazines like Downbeat, Metronome, and Variety would always write about Lady Day's concerts and new songs, but after the Strange Fruit performance, there was an odd silence. Music critics were avoiding mentioning the song. Some were even starting to avoid writing Billie Holiday's name at all, because invisible hands were working behind the scenes. Secret pressure was being applied to big media company owners, newspaper editors, and radio station managers. The message was clear: don't write about Strange Fruit, don't talk about it, don't advertise it. This silencing operation was so effective that Strange Fruit began to disappear from the media as if it had never existed. Only word-of-mouth rumors remained. But even these rumors were dangerous, because anyone who talked about the song could become a potential target. When Lady Day realized this situation, she was shocked. She had seen how easily the American media could be manipulated. In May, the threats became more concrete. Some of the letters coming to Billie Holiday's house openly bore KKK stamps. The language used in these letters was much harsher and more detailed. One letter read, "Lady Day, learn to behave like a real lady. Otherwise you'll dance from southern trees. If you sing those white lies again, we'll find you." Another letter contained these horrifying details. "We'll burn you, hang you, tear you apart. Just like the others. You're just a black girl, know your place." Most terrifying was the letter containing a photograph of her house, a photo taken from outside Billie Holiday's apartment in Harlem with a red X marked on it. Written underneath, "We can find you. You can't escape." These letters made Lady Day paranoid. She was constantly looking around, feeling like she was being followed. And she was right, because she really was being followed. The New York branch of the KKK had targeted Billie Holiday for exemplary punishment. Their goal was to silence her and intimidate other black artists. In mid-June, what Lady Day feared happened. As she was leaving Café Society, 3 men cornered her. Their faces were masked. They carried clubs. "Are you the girl who sings that song?" they asked, and Billie Holiday froze. "If you sing it again, these clubs will be for you," they said. Fortunately, other customers leaving the club saw the incident and started shouting. The attackers fled, but their message had hit home. Lady Day was now in physical danger. After this incident, Barney Josephson hired special security for Billie Holiday, but this made Lady Day even more tense. Now she was going everywhere with guards, constantly living on edge. After the attack attempt, Billie Holiday's mother, Sadie Fagan, began to worry. She begged her daughter, "Give up this song, your life is more important." But Lady Day was determined. "Mom, some things are more important than life. This song is bigger than me." In July 1939, the FBI entered the scene. They hadn't officially targeted Billie Holiday yet, but they were gathering information about Strange Fruit. Harry Anslinger, head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, had classified the song as unity-disrupting propaganda. FBI agents started appearing at Café Society. They were watching Billie Holiday's performances, evaluating the song's impact. Officially, they were there for public order reasons, but their real purpose was different. Anslinger's directive was clear. "This song is disturbing the south of the country. Open a file on the person singing it." Thus, Billie Holiday entered the FBI's radar. The first FBI report began like this: "A colored female singer named Billie Holiday is singing content that incites white citizens. It is recommended that she be placed under surveillance." This report was the beginning of a war that would last 20 years. The FBI now began to see Lady Day not just as a singer, but as a national security threat. When news of Strange Fruit reached the South, the reaction was very harsh. Newspapers in states like Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia characterized the song as black propaganda and anti-South hate speech. The Atlanta Journal wrote in its editorial, "This song damages the honor of the South, tries to slander our past. Such content should be banned." Worse, Southern governors were pressuring New York. Mississippi Governor Theodore Bilbo had written to New York Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia requesting the song be banned. Southern politicians were also pressuring the federal government. Some congressmen were proposing laws to stop such divisive content. These pressures worked. Although no official ban was issued at the federal level, all radio stations in the South refused to play Strange Fruit. Even mentioning the song's name was forbidden. Columbia Records' refusal to record Strange Fruit was a big blow to Billie Holiday. But Lady Day didn't give up. She began researching small independent record companies. Finally, she convinced Commodore Records. Milt Gabler, a brave producer, agreed to risk recording the song. But even the recording process was difficult. While recording the song in the studio, they were constantly disturbed. The phone rang. Threatening messages came. One day the studio windows were even stoned. There was a note saying, "We don't make black propaganda." After the record was pressed, distribution became a problem. Major stores refused to sell the product. No store in the South put the record on their shelves. Some states even unofficially banned the sale of the record. Only small music shops in northern states dared to sell the Strange Fruit record. And those store owners were also threatened and boycotted. Billie Holiday singing Strange Fruit also created controversy within the black community. Some appreciated Lady Day's courage, saying finally someone is telling the truth. But some were also worried. Leaders of civil rights organizations like the NAACP were in a dilemma. They supported the song's message, but found the method too radical. Some said such a harsh approach increases social tension. Black newspapers were also divided. The Crisis magazine began writing articles supporting the song, while some conservative black newspapers called it provocation. There was also disagreement among jazz musicians in Harlem. Big names like Duke Ellington and Count Basie were cautious. They were also against racism, but saw such open defiance as dangerous. But young black musicians supported Billie Holiday. For them, Lady Day had become a hero. Even though official channels tried to silence Strange Fruit, the song continued to spread through underground channels. Oral culture kicked in. People memorized the song and taught it to each other. It began to be sung secretly in black churches. Preachers incorporated Strange Fruit into services, defining it as a prayer for justice. Of course, very secretly, because churches could also face pressure. Students at universities in northern states learned and sang the song. Especially black universities made Strange Fruit an anthem of resistance. The most interesting development occurred in white intellectual circles. Artists, writers, and academics in Greenwich Village began supporting the song. For them, Strange Fruit was not just a protest song but a symbol of artistic freedom. Thanks to this underground network, the song couldn't be banned. Every attempt to silence it made it stronger. All these pressures deeply affected Billie Holiday. The young woman, just 24 years old, had suddenly found herself at the center of a national controversy. Sometimes she blamed herself. "I wish I had never sung that song." But as she saw the impact of Strange Fruit, her determination grew. Support letters from the black community strengthened her. She received hundreds of letters saying, "You spoke for us. Thank you." Lady Day made her decision. She would continue singing Strange Fruit. She would stand up to those who threatened her. But this decision would determine the rest of her life. By the end of 1939, Billie Holiday's life had completely changed. A year earlier, she was just a talented jazz singer. Now she was a national figure. But the price of this fame was heavy. Her concert schedule had decreased by half. Major record companies didn't want to work with her. She was constantly living under threat. An FBI file had been opened. But Strange Fruit continued to grow stronger. The song now belonged not just to Billie Holiday, but to all of America. It got stronger with each performance. Lady Day understood by the end of that year that there was no going back. Strange Fruit had changed her, had become her mission. She was no longer just a singer, but also an activist. As 1940 began, Billie Holiday knew the real war was just beginning. FBI pressure would increase. Threats would become more concrete. Her life would become even more difficult. But Strange Fruit would continue to live, because that song was no longer just music. It was the symbol of a movement. Every attempt to ban it made it stronger. Lady Day's decision in 1939 to continue singing Strange Fruit would change the course of American history, because that song had turned upside down the quietly accepted racism, awakening consciences. As 1940 began, the campaign against Billie Holiday became even more organized. No longer were there just individual threats, there was now a systematic silencing operation. This operation, coordinated by the FBI, involved the media, the record industry, local governments, and even organized crime. Harry Anslinger's Federal Bureau of Narcotics began thickening Billie Holiday's file. Lady Day's private life, circle of friends, financial situation, even her romantic relationships were being investigated. The goal was to find any weakness to catch her. A new tactic emerged that the FBI used during this period: planting spies around Lady Day. Agents disguised as musicians tried to infiltrate her tour crew. Even some fans were forced by the FBI to provide information. Lady Day could no longer trust anyone. Every new person she met was a potential spy. This paranoid atmosphere seriously began affecting Billie Holiday's mental health. Sleep disorders, constant tension, and distrust were eating her away from the inside. But she didn't stop singing Strange Fruit. In the summer of 1940, Southern politicians launched an organized campaign, led by Mississippi Senator Theodore Bilbo. Lobbying efforts began to ban Strange Fruit at the federal level. In his Senate speech, Bilbo said, "This song is disrupting our nation's unity. These hateful words targeting our Southern citizens must be immediately banned." His speech received a standing ovation. Southern governors wrote a joint letter to New York Mayor LaGuardia. In their letters, they claimed Strange Fruit was negatively affecting interstate commerce and that Southern tourists were avoiding coming to New York. This economic pressure was effective. Some hotel chains in New York began not hiring Billie Holiday to avoid losing Southern customers. Tourist destinations like Atlantic City and Miami Beach put Lady Day on their unwanted persons list. Even worse was the travel restrictions imposed by Southern states. Billie Holiday giving concerts in states like Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia was effectively banned. She could even be harassed while passing through these states. In the mid-1940s, a new actor joined the situation: organized crime. Most jazz clubs of that era were under mob control, and the mob began to be affected by political pressures. The Italian mafia in New York was being pressured by groups with business connections to Southern politicians. Mob bosses were being told, "Shut up that black girl or our business in the South will suffer." Lucky Luciano's men visited Billie Holiday. The message wasn't explicit, but the implication was very clear: drop this song, or things could go badly. Lady Day took this threat seriously because the mob didn't joke around, but she still didn't back down. She just started being more careful. Mob pressure manifested in different ways. Protection pressure was applied to clubs where Billie Holiday performed. Owners were intimidated. Some venues stopped working with Lady Day because of this pressure. By 1941, Strange Fruit had been almost completely erased from all mainstream media. This wasn't coincidence, it was a coordinated censorship operation. The owners of major media groups were being pressured by their Southern business partners. Major newspapers like the New York Times and Washington Post weren't even mentioning Billie Holiday's name. Music critics were ignoring her, not writing about her concerts. An unofficial blacklist was created for radio stations. This list included not only Strange Fruit, but also other works by artists who played the song. All of Billie Holiday's songs were effectively banned. Most tragic was that even black media couldn't withstand the pressure. Even black newspapers like the Amsterdam News began avoiding writing about Strange Fruit because they were also being threatened. This media silence was so effective that Strange Fruit began to seem as if it had never existed. It only continued to live in underground sources and oral culture. The effect of constantly living under pressure also began to reflect on Billie Holiday's physical health. Starting in 1942, she was frequently getting sick. Doctors said stress and sleeplessness were affecting her. Lady Day began turning to alcohol more often. She was drinking calming beverages before performances, using alcohol at night to be able to sleep. This situation also began affecting her voice. More dangerous was her need for painkillers. Constant tension was causing muscle pain, and Billie Holiday began taking painkiller pills. Few people knew at the time that these pills could be addictive. FBI agents even saw these health problems as an opportunity. If they could categorize the medications Lady Day used as narcotics, they could find grounds to arrest her. When the Pearl Harbor attack occurred on December 7, 1940, this new atmosphere added a different dimension to the campaign against Billie Holiday. Strange Fruit was now seen not just as an anti-South song, but also as content that disrupts national unity. It was said to be causing division within the country during wartime. A national security threat label was added to the FBI's Billie Holiday file. Lady Day was now suspected of being not just a drug criminal, but also an enemy agent. A new argument emerged that the FBI used during this period. Strange fruit provides material for German propaganda. Although this claim was completely baseless, it seemed credible in the war atmosphere. As patriotism rose during the war, even people who supported strange fruit began to hesitate. Those saying maybe not now, let's wait until the war ends, multiplied. In 1944, the FBI's patience ran out. They arrested Billie Holiday in Philadelphia for possessing opium. Who gave her the opium was never revealed, but suspicions pointed to the FBI itself. In court, Billie Holiday was given a choice: either receive treatment and quit her singing career, or go to federal prison. Lady Day chose prison because she knew she couldn't stop singing Strange Fruit. The 10 months she spent at Alderson Federal Prison Camp were a turning point in Billie Holiday's life. Although she didn't experience physical violence in prison, she was under psychological pressure. She was constantly told to give up that song. Even the prison warden tried to convince her, "Billie, you're a talented girl. Give up this obsession, sing your normal songs." But Lady Day was determined. When she was released after serving her sentence, Billie Holiday was more determined than before. At her first concert, she again sang Strange Fruit. The FBI's plan had completely backfired. When the war ended in 1945, some things in America began to change. Black and white soldiers who had fought together began questioning racial discrimination. This atmosphere was creating developments in Billie Holiday's favor. The younger generation began thinking more liberally after the war. Students learning Strange Fruit at universities embraced the song. Now being forbidden made it even more attractive. Support was also growing in intellectual circles. Writers like James Baldwin and Norman Mailer began praising Strange Fruit. When artistic freedom debates occurred, the song was cited as an example, but the FBI had noticed this change and altered their strategy. They would now begin using more insidious methods instead of direct pressure. As the 1950s began, the FBI developed new tactics against Billie Holiday. Instead of trying to silence her directly, they now focused on undermining her credibility. Harry Anslinger's new strategy was this: portray Lady Day as a drug addict, so her words would carry no weight. Unfortunately, this strategy was successful. FBI agents began infiltrating stronger drugs into Billie Holiday's circle. First cocaine, then heroin. The goal was to make her addicted and render her ineffective. This horrifying strategy worked. By the mid-1950s, Billie Holiday had actually become addicted. She now had to deal with her own health problems rather than Strange Fruit. Toward the end of the 1950s, Billie Holiday's condition became critical. Heroin addiction had destroyed her liver. She looked 70 at age 44. The FBI saw even this situation as an opportunity. In 1959, when Lady Day was hospitalized, they still arrested her. They saw her as a security risk until her last breath. When Billie Holiday died on July 17, 1959, Strange Fruit was still a banned song. But Lady Day's death would give the song new meaning: Strange Fruit's victory. After Billie Holiday's death, Strange Fruit began to be rediscovered. As the civil rights movement gained strength in the 1960s, the song became the movement's anthem. Artists like Nina Simone, Sam Cooke, and Mahalia Jackson reinterpreted Strange Fruit. Each new version added power to the song. By the end of the 1960s, the song was no longer banned. It even began to be called the most important song of the 20th century in respected music magazines. In 2002, it was inducted into the Library of Congress's National Recording Registry. The song the FBI had tried to destroy for 20 years was finally accepted as part of America's cultural heritage. When Billie Holiday sang Strange Fruit in 1939, she thought she was just giving a 3-minute performance, but she was actually taking action that would change the course of American history. That morning when she woke up, she knew her life would change. But it wasn't just her life that was changing. America's conscience was changing too. The FBI, KKK, Southern politicians, record companies, media, they all did everything they could to silence Strange Fruit. But they couldn't succeed, because Strange Fruit wasn't just a song. It was the voice of silenced truth. It was the scream of ignored pain. It was the confession of denied history. With the decision Billie Holiday made that morning to continue singing Strange Fruit, she changed not just music history, but American history. And today, Strange Fruit continues to be sung. With each performance, Lady Day's spirit comes alive again. In each note, the voices of those who stand against injustice echo. The FBI silenced Lady Day, but couldn't silence Strange Fruit, because truth can never be buried forever. Sooner or later, the earth cracks, and the seed sprouts. Strange fruit became that seed, and its fruits continue to ripen.